But before I ever picked up a drug or a drink was hyperfixation. That's what I realized, obsessive thinking, the same, they call it overthinking as well.
Mm.
The same thought going, oh, what if this, what if that? Oh my God, this. And it can make you feel crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about the power of that deep, deep, deep code. Welcome to Whole by Design, the podcast exploring the human experience with compassion and curiosity. Together, we'll uncover powerful internal resources and tools to help you embrace clarity, joy, and your full potential because you are whole by design. Hi, everyone. On this week's episode, we will be diving into hyperfixation and how it has really impacted the community that my guests and I are a big part of, which is people who have been relinquished. Stay until the end when Zara will be sharing the two key components that she sees as pivotal for really stepping out of this zone of hyperfixation slash addiction slash compulsive behavior and really living into the potential that all of us are destined and have a right to enjoy. Today, I'd like to welcome Zara Phillips, who is a world-renowned adoptee advocate, author, and filmmaker. She has spent decades working to really empower the community of adoptees, and I am a personal fan. Before we jump in, don't forget to check out our website, www.vivapartnership.com, for free and low-cost resources that can change your life. Thank you so much for joining us, Zara.
Well, thank you. It's really great to see you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So am I. We both had a little reaction to this term hyperfixation, right? It's not something for me as a trauma and addictions expert, and of course, a person who is adopted. It's not something that I've really come across in my clinical work very often. However, a lot of people are really relating to it in today's age, specifically around how a passion can then become an obsession and really end up getting disruptive in our lives.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've never heard the word before. And I was, as we were talking before, I'm like, what does that mean? Because I always think of addiction as being something that gets in the way of people's lives. But and then I was thinking too that like it's almost like overthinking.
Yeah.
Maybe that term is about overthinking, and why do people overthink or obsess? And I think it's almost because you feel out of control, and that somehow makes you feel you're in control and almost gives you a feeling of safety somehow.
And isn't that safety feeling so important, right? It drives us all. It's a fundamental state that as human beings, we want to feel safe in this world. It's part of adapting, it's part of surviving. And as an adoptee advocate and as an adopted person yourself, I'm sure you see that all the time where us adopted people go to great lengths to feel safe, to feel like we're going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think, it's also just people with trauma wanting to know, well, what's going to happen? And obsessing about, well, if I do this or I do this, and just again about safety, because we come from, the early beginnings of our life were, where's our mother? What's happening to us? And I think that affects your whole life. I mean, there's a lifelong impact to that. So I
Yes.
think we absolutely have to have coping mechanisms. As you know, anybody does that has trauma, but for us, it starts right from the beginning.
Yes. Yes. And I think one of the struggles that in general our culture perpetuates is the idea that switching from one family to the next doesn't absolutely shatter your nervous system. And of course, when you talk about early relinquishment, and of course, people get relinquished at all ages for lots of reasons, and the reasons always have some type of distress to them, either financial reasons, emotional reasons, relational reasons that are less than ideal, where a child can't really be safe in the environment where they were, or is politically or financially, we could really go off track here, around what goes into how relinquishment happens. But nonetheless, the baby, the child, the person removed from their biological environment is the one who really bears the scars of that. And I think what I see is that the worst tragedy is when the adopted person themselves, the person who's been through that experience, is told by everyone else that they're lucky, that they should be grateful. And so when they're having kind of what's a normal reaction, the symptoms, and then maybe the hyperfixation, we'll call it, which might be an overthinking, but it could be really a focus on work that gets in the way of life, or a focus on drugs that gets in the way of life, or a focus on performance that gets in the way of life. And I think you and I spoke a little bit about how many adopted people, really their drug of choice is pleasing other people. They will say yes to stuff. They will bend a million different ways, almost you could say obsessively, because they're annihilating themselves, their boundaries, their limits, their needs, their desires in the service of seeking safety, you could
Yeah.
say.
Oh
And
no, absolutely. And also I think that that ties into codependency as well, because I didn't realize, years ago, I think I was talking to a therapist and I didn't really understand how codependent we can be coming from these kind of traumas. But again, it's to do with safety. It's to do with the people pleasing. And I think what's really took me a time to realize is when somebody, like years ago, I was talking about my birth mother. Well, she abandoned me. She abandoned me. That's how we feel. That's not actually the story, but that's how we feel. And, I can never forgive her for that because she abandoned me. And somebody said to me, well, where in your life have you ever abandoned yourself? And I was like, oh, I do it all the time.
all
All
the time.
so that has been a really good tool for me to understand and go, hold on a minute. I felt abandoned. That wasn't actually the story. It's way more complicated than that. It just was not allowed to keep me. But then I ended up abandoning myself. And I do see that with adoptees. And we do that in so many ways, when you just can't be your authentic self because you have to please other people. Oh, my parents will be upset. My adopted parents wouldn't want me talking about this, or my birth mother would feel hurt, all those things. Um, and I think that's why we have more of that obsessive mind.
Yes,
Maybe. Yeah.
that's right. Well, I studied this in my dissertation long ago. And in fact, that propensity, the relationship between trauma and addictions, that propensity to get into that obsessive kind of compulsive behavior, chemical addiction, behavioral addiction, thinking, is way, way higher for someone who has experienced trauma, because it's a natural way of coping. It's a natural way our bodies move towards to feel safe. And yes, I think, one of the struggles, especially around something like codependency or people pleasing, is if you don't even identify it as something that was hard, or it's not in your conscious memory, or you haven't been exposed to some kind of reading or information, scientific information about how your body works, you might be one of the numbers. You might be one of the casualties. You and I both know adoptees are overrepresented in suicide statistics, in drug treatment statistics, in residential treatment statistics. And that's a tragedy that we're both really passionate about changing.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear more about what you're doing this week. It's super exciting about changing the story and helping to empower other people like you and I.
Well, I live, as you know, between America and England. So I was adopted in England. So I know like all the laws here compared to, the states in America where, records are sealed, and in England records are open. But regardless of that, there's so many commonalities between all adoptees because we were all relinquished, no matter what country we're from. We all share the same, and there's the same statistics of suicide with adoptees
Yeah.
in this country as there is in America, and wherever you go. Um, so over here in England, I mean, in a way, you can say there's been more progression than in America, because America still, we're struggling to get them to open basic records and give information. We're asking for a government apology
Yeah.
for what they call the forced adoption era. So for years, I would think, well, I wasn't really from the forced adoption era, because I believed the narrative, which was your mother couldn't take care of you. She was young. That was the story that I had. So then I would think, I grew up thinking, well, obviously she was not capable of being a mother. But actually, that wasn't true. The truth is, she didn't have the support to be a mother. There was nothing physically unfit about this woman. There are obviously some mothers that are mentally ill and drug addicted that can't necessarily take care of their babies. But the high percentage from that time period, even in America too, our mothers were young and we were illegitimate. That is it. And,
Mhm.
we grow up with this whole story of must be something wrong with your mother. You had to be given to another family and you can't tell anybody, and no medical information, no records, no name, all the same things that you have suffered too in America. So what we have done in Australia, they're quite ahead of the time, and the Prime Minister did an apology, and it was so powerful.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
read that. It was so powerful.
it's on YouTube. You can actually see the video.
Oh, I have not seen the video. I'm going to look it up now. It's so
Yeah,
powerful.
so powerful. And there were mothers and their children, and adoptees. Everybody's kind of weeping, and so it's begun to happen a little bit here. Like in Ireland, they are acknowledging what happened to these mothers in the mother and baby homes, how they're finding babies' bodies. 800 babies were just found buried. I mean, horrific. These mothers weren't even told if their babies that they died. So, there's all this stuff now being uncovered. And in England, there were between 200 and 300 mother and baby homes, and probably a ton in America.
A ton.
But, the focus, and my mother was put in a mother and baby home. So my plan is, and it was just an idea because there's the rebel in me that still likes to get out there. Now that I have a voice, it's weird when I think I had a voice when I was younger, but it was the wrong voice. It was the angry yelling in class and being disruptive. I was one of those kids getting attention, but not for the right reasons as such. And now that I found my voice and I don't feel I need to people please anymore, adopted family and birth family, I can be more authentic around how this has impacted me and how it's impacted other people. And it's time for us to start sharing how we feel about what happened to us. So we're all going to Parliament. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea.
I'm so excited about your bravery and your voice.
Yeah,
Oh
and
God.
things are happening. The media are picking up on it, and we're going to have our banners. And I just think, just as a group of adoptees and birth mothers together, just to hold up a banner and say, this is how I feel, is going to be very healing in itself. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be and people are very excited. So I don't know. I cannot tell you. You have to talk to me after
In a
when you
few days, in a
get
few days, I would love to do that. And I'm like energetically sending you so much love and support because it's powerful. I think when a lot of things get hidden or misunderstood or things aren't spoken, that is what fuels addiction. That is what fuels hyperfixation. That's what fuels suffering. When it's all unconscious or just automatic, lives get disrupted, relationships are ruined. I mean, it really wreaks havoc on a system.
Absolutely. When some of the adoptees and a friend of mine, they're so worried I can't be seen by the media because, what will happen? My family will be upset. I mean, that's what people don't understand, how we've had to live with this sort of, um, in between all these families. And because other people have feelings around our story, we've not been able to be authentic. And I have to say, a few months ago, I was on the news here because the BBC was doing a piece. And
Mm.
we made the 6 o'clock news, which is a big deal in England because it's a lot of views. And I have to tell you, I bawled my eyes out that day. I was sobbing and I'm thinking, why am I crying? This is like great. And I thought it is because when I was a child, I was not allowed to talk about this. And my
Yeah.
adopted mother, because of her fear and her wound, she didn't want people to know I was adopted. She didn't want to talk about infertility. It's so complicated. And, she passed away a long time ago, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But I still had that feeling of, oh my God, she would be so upset with me. I'm on the BBC News with something I was not supposed to be talking about. How would she feel about that? So it still affects your adult life.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel that, I live that, and I've studied it.
Hmm.
Right? And those codes, those deeper codes, they run deep. You already told me with your words, logically, you know that you're really free in every logical way. And you do this work to help people find their authentic self. And yet there it is. It's a survival code.
And
It's
it's
not
still,
even what?
I'm saying it still came up, and my mother's dead, and I'm still like, what would my mother think? And then I'm like, she's rolling in her grave, and I thought, you know what? She's probably very proud, actually, that I finally have been able to talk about it in an honest way. But yeah, it is deep, and it does block us. And I think the word, tell me the word again,
Hyperfixation.
hyper
Hyperfixation.
is because of all of this. Obsessive thinking. I mean, I'm in recovery from drugs and alcohol. I've been sober since I was 22, thank God. But
Amazing, Zara.
but before I ever picked up a drug or a drink was hyperfixation. That's what I realized. Obsessive thinking, the same. They call it overthinking as well.
Mm.
The same thought going, oh, what if this? What if that? Oh my God, this. And it can make you feel crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And think about the power of that deep, deep, deep code. You've worked on it. You've been sober. You've been in recovery for a long time, for over 3 decades, right? And yet, in this moment of this really important interview on BBC, it still had whispers from the past. I mean, right? You've worked on this in a massive way, but it's primal, right? It's primal in there. And so this is the kind of power that I think when we tell our stories and we make it more visible, it gives people permission to do the same. And even untangling some of these complicated topics like you are right now
Yeah.
on this podcast, as well as in your advocacy work this week, it's powerful. It starts to open a door for people. So I really appreciate the life that you're living that gives people permission to do the same. It means a lot to me personally, as well as professionally.
Yeah, you never know where these things are going to go. I always think we do stuff like you do your work, your passion, and almost maybe because we want to understand ourselves more. And then you just bring in more and more, adoptees just come to you or they write to me, and it is just wonderful, all of that. I mean, it really is wonderful. I'm
It
very
is wonderful. And I feel like I'm always learning and growing. And I love being a, a voice that gives people opportunities to do the same in lots of different ways. And that really is part of the heart behind this podcast, Whole by Design, is helping people connect with the tools and the resources that really help move the needle to moving into their most authentic experience, just to use some of your words around authenticity, which I love. So
not being afraid, thinking, I mean, already I've had adoptees saying, oh, I really want to come to the protest, but I can't be interviewed by anyone. And I mustn't be seen because if somebody gets a glimpse of me, and I have to remind myself, of how I used to live like that all the time. So I try to be, gentle with them, and I said to them, don't not come because of your fear around that, because actually nothing may happen anyway.
Yeah.
They might not get seen, and they don't have to speak and be interviewed, but it's like giving yourself permission to just be with people that get your experience, and letting
Yeah.
go of everybody. We're not responsible for what other people think about us. It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But I see that posture in you as an observer and listening to what you're saying as your heart's desire to have them get a taste of the freedom that you've moved into by shedding some of those old protective mechanisms that we all come by honestly, right? You have compassion for it, and you're also at the same time holding the cellular knowledge of your path and how different it can be, right? Because it's all an illusion. It's like a mirage. It's like an old shadow that can move so quickly.
And it is, I am in a different position because my mother, who was controlling, or really emotionally, I felt very controlled in a sense, or I allowed myself to be. And I worried so much of what, again, I think it's that rejection, or that I'm going to be rejected or something. And my mum probably wasn't even aware what she was doing, but
Right.
I did it that way. And the truth is, since she passed away, there is a freedom, there just is. And I hate to say that, but I hope that adoptive parents can understand that,
Mhm.
if their child is out there, or, young adult is out there needing to express themselves about how they feel about being adopted, it's not because they don't love you. It's
Right.
just because we need to explore that part of ourselves. And actually, I think adoptive parents are scared of their child rejecting them and running off with the birth parent, but we're also scared of them rejecting us. So we're all actually feeling the same.
Right.
You know,
That's so important. That's really powerful and a great common space to maybe build more compassion for the other part of the adoption constellation, right? It is complicated. I think that's a great way to even phrase it. It's very complicated. But I love what you're, oh, go ahead.
something layers, everybody's layers.
Yeah, there are a lot of different layers. So when it comes to, these, I'm gonna shift gears because I could talk to you all day, but um, when it comes to these two components that you really see as key to living into authenticity and really experiencing lasting recovery from any type of obsessive thinking, hyperfixation, addiction, tell me a little bit more about what you see as those two key elements.
Well, I can tell you, for me as an addict and who has been able to maintain sobriety, not, I've never picked up a drug or a drink, but my goodness, I have been a bit, I've been a basket case, and I have not always behaved appropriately over the years. Um, I had to learn to be really honest, no matter what I was going through. Because the thing is, for an addict, they say you're only as sick as your secrets. And if I start hiding, oh, I've had this thought, or maybe I don't want to live anymore, or maybe my depression is bad, or maybe I want to run off with some man, or whatever it is, or shop, or all the things, as we know, there's so many addictions. I have had to learn to humble myself and always let somebody know. But I've created a good community of safe people where I will phone them and say, I have 30 years of recovery, and I've been thinking about doing this destructive thing, which will still come up for me. I'm not ever going to tell anybody that it doesn't. And that alleviates it. I'm able to work through it. I'm able to look at, why am I suddenly feeling again like I want to annihilate myself in some different way? What's actually going on? And, just talking through with somebody else will stop me then doing destructive behavior. And for me, that is the key. And I've heard it in, I go to 12-step program. I've heard it with adoptees talking at groups. we have to find a place where it's safe to really tell people. I think especially for us, because we weren't allowed to, well, I
Oh,
wasn't, I couldn't say, I'm in grief, mum. I miss my birth mother. I'm depressed all the time. I have anxiety. It's like, but aren't you lucky? Look, all the things that are said to us. And if I were to admit, I don't feel lucky, I don't feel grateful, what was going to happen to me as a child? So we lie. So I've really found, and even, at my old age, stuff still comes up where I feel stressed and I might go into an old behavior, but it doesn't last so long. But I still have to use the same tools.
yeah.
And another thing I would say is absolutely community. Because
Yes.
as
Love that
Gabor
too.
Mate, you were talking about Gabor Mate, and he always says addiction is isolation. And how we get out of addiction is community, is not isolating anymore. So for me, it's still, and life is, whether you've got trauma or not, whether you're adopted or not, life is pretty intense right now in the world.
It
Um,
is.
and a lot of people want to escape in various ways because it's a lot. We've the news and oh my goodness, it's talk about fixation. It's endless. So in a way, sometimes I feel like I need those tools more than ever just to maintain some peace.
Yes. And isn't that piece so important? Okay, so the two main arenas where you see real healing happening, and it sounds like a consistent commitment to them, is one, finding at least one person, if not many people, that you can humbly be your authentic self, honestly showing up around what's going on for you. And the second is being part of community that supports you, that you connect with, and that you feel a part of, and how powerful that is as an antidote to really struggling in isolation. I love it. Zara, thank you so much for being a light on this planet and for helping with your humble sharing in a sometimes very public places, whether it's your books or your films or your courtship with the news or public advocacy. I really appreciate you for being that person for all of us who have been relinquished and for others who can relate to it. It's not just adoptees and those in foster care that can relate to that feeling of being abandoned that comes in all kinds of shapes and forms. And I would say sometimes it's people who on the outside, everything looks great, but their parents just weren't available, either because they were working multiple jobs and didn't have the capacity to really be present, or because they're high performing and they were committed and gone and they were kind of passed off to nannies and babysitters and things like that. That feeling of neglect can cause and fuel the same type of hyperfixation slash addiction slash behaviors that really interrupt the ability to live a fulfilling, peaceful, and authentic life. So I appreciate you. I'm wishing you well on your protest. I hope it gets lots of coverage. And more importantly, I hope it gets just one more apology on the globe, because they're well overdue. And I appreciate what you're doing to make that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Whole by Design. I hope it left you feeling inspired to toss out the labels, embrace new perspectives, and take one step closer to the joy and clarity you deserve. As always, visit www.vivapartnership.com to access our free and low-cost resources that will empower you and your loved ones on health and healing. Let's spread the message, subscribe, review, or share this episode with someone who could benefit from a stigma-dropping approach to mental fitness today.